So sorry, is that not enough? Here, I've got more.
Ah! This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Hello my beautiful watchers. Let's talk about this new Rebecca, shall we? I have thoughts. This isn't an official Lost in adaptation, but I will mostly be talking about how it ties into the book because that's just how I do. I started the show because that's where my mind just always goes when I watch films like this. Rebecca the book is a psychological gothic thriller authored by English writer Daphne du Maurier and published in 1938 to critical acclaim and commercial success. 2 years later, in 1940, Alfred Hitchcock made his debut in American filmmaking by directing a silver screen adaptation of Rebecca, starring Laurence Olivier, Joan Fontaine, and Judith Anderson, that was equally well received, winning an Academy Award for Best Picture. In 2017, I made a Patreon-sponsored episode of Lost in Adaptation comparing the two. It's an okay episode, I guess. I hate watching my old stuff, but people seem to enjoy it. And now, in the year of our Lord 2020, Netflix has chosen to take its own shot at bringing Rebecca to life, and it's not very good as an adaptation or a standalone film. It stars Lily James, Armie Hammer, and Dame Kristen Scott Thomas in the three main roles. Okay, here's the very basic story of the book. I went into a lot more detail in the other episode if you crave more. A young, naive, and exceptionally timid woman you never learn the name of, henceforth referred to as the lead, marries a grumpy but handsome and insanely rich older man called Maxim de Winter, who lives in a famously amazing and beautiful estate in England. All is not well though, because Maxim, his family, the staff at Manderley, and basically everyone in the surrounding village seems to be super hung up on Maxim's 1 year deceased first wife Rebecca. In particular, the housekeeper Mrs. Danvers, who takes a massive dislike to the lead for daring to try to fill Rebecca's shoes and spends the next few months being hostile to her, sabotaging her marriage and manipulating her into situations to make her suicidally miserable. Eventually, Rebecca's body is unexpectedly discovered and Maxim confesses to his new wife that she was not as perfect as everyone believed and was in fact an abusive serial adulterer who he murdered in a crime of passion. This inspires the lead to spontaneously grow a backbone, and she commits to trying to keep Maxim away from prison and/or execution. There's an investigation, and Maxim is almost found out, but at the last minute, in a lucky twist of fate, it turns out there's evidence that Rebecca was dying of cancer, so her mysterious death is deemed a suicide. As there's nothing else Mrs. Danvers can do to punish her beloved Rebecca's killer, she burns down Manderley and runs away. The end. Just on the film side of things, one of the few redeeming features is it's very visually pleasing. They really utilise the beautiful natural landscapes and buildings of South Britain to great effect. Dame Christian, I think, was the only person who managed to make the most out of the role she was given, and Lily James was fine. I think her biggest hindrance was that her character was intentionally written to have very little personality of her own for most of the story. However, things are dragged down a lot by the male lead. Even taking into account that Laurence Olivier is an almost comically hard act to follow, I still feel Armie Hammer delivered a shockingly monotone and charisma-free performance as Maxim de Winter. I don't think I've seen anything else he's been in, so I don't know if this is usual for him or if trying to maintain the English accent was throwing off his game, but yeah, he was a serious weak link in this film. As an adaptation, Netflix Rebecca keeps to almost all of the essential plot beats with only a few major deviations. There's quite a few minor ones, but I think that its main failing is in the characterizations of almost every important player. If I were to pick one thing that I think summarizes Rebecca 2020, it would be Maxim de Winter is young, shredded, and horny. The significant age gap between them is now non-existent, as both actors are in their early 30s, and they are way more affectionate towards each other than they ever were in the book. There wasn't really any physical contact between them described originally due to a combination of Maxim being permanently distant from the lead and the book being written in 1930 when so much as kissing your wife on the cheek in public was considered highly inappropriate in high society. This leads me to my next issue with the film. When they first announced this new adaptation, I wondered if they were planning on modernizing it or if they were going to put in the extra work to stick to the original time period. And the answer turned out to be kind of both. By that I mean they kept the 1930s setting, but most of the characters act like they're from the present with all our modern behaviours and relative inhibitions. This film seems to be intent on villainizing Mrs. Van Hopper, the lead's employer at the start of the story, which I don't know, it seems a little unnecessary to me. She was a vain and self-absorbed woman to be sure, but she was never cruel in the book. There's already a prominent evil older woman in the story, so I'm not sure why they felt we needed another one to keep us going until she shows up. Jack Favell, the slimiest of gits in the novel, honestly comes off a little sympathetic in this, though I don't know if that was intentional. He seems genuinely upset when he finds out that Rebecca may have been pregnant with his child when she was murdered. Though they also slipped in a somewhat gratuitous scene of him groping the lead, which I really could have done without. The film fails to really impart just how utterly perfect Rebecca had seemed to be to literally everyone who had ever met her, and as a result, the lead's paranoia and obsessive behavior towards her lacks a lot of nuance. It looks like they might have become aware of this during production, because they eventually give up on subtlety in building this plot and resort to a dream sequence where everyone stands around the lead chanting Rebecca's name over and over again while she pulls horrified faces. Netflix ends up making the same mistake that Hitchcock did, but making it much, much worse. Namely, they couldn't resist making Maxim more likable and the lead more self-confident before the big reveal about what Rebecca really was like and how she died. I cannot overstate how much of a linchpin moment that was in the book's plot. It was the game-changing event that redefined everything and removed the shadow from their marriage and gave the lead the confidence she needed to stand up for herself and stop defining herself as Rebecca's not-as-good replacement. In a way, it's when the book stops being about Rebecca and really becomes the lead's story. But the film includes moments of unmistakable backbone from the lead right from the start, as she gets the last word in with Mrs. Van Hopper and attempts to dismiss Mrs. Danvers, forcing her to appeal to her sympathy to avoid it. Combine this with Maxim being kind and affectionate to her right from the get-go, and the paradigm shift before and after the big plot twist is way less defined, and the pinnacle moment is greatly diminished. Mrs. Danvers is occasionally brought up in discussions of gay-coded villains because of the different ways her nebulous relationship with Rebecca has been interpreted over the years. My personal feeling from the novel was that her love for her was strictly maternal, but there was definitely more overtones of a sexual nature in the Hitchcock adaptation. I'm not always the best judge of this stuff because I'm disturbingly blind to subtext and symbolism, but it looks to me like Netflix dropped this angle and returned to the original adopted daughter version of their relationship. They do, however, follow Hitchcock's example and kill her off at the end, which, as I mentioned in the Lost in Adaptation episode, was probably a demand from the Hays Code to bury your gays. Instead of having the personality of a baby dormouse, the lead in this film is more of the flustered, awkward, and clumsy type, which, as you saw, is one of the things that gave me disturbing 50 Shades of Grey vibes, along with the montage of holiday activities. The book Rebecca was unmistakably an influence for 50 Shades, and by influence, I of course mean E.L. James ripped entire sections off wholesale. What few plot points couldn't be traced directly to Twilight were very clearly derivative of du Maurier's work. I know this because E.L. James openly flaunted her plagiarism by copy-pasting the first page of Rebecca into one of the sequel books as Anna reads it and tries to draw comparisons to her own life. I cannot express how horrified I am that the influence might have come full circle. I was hoping they would at least have the balls to have Maxim be a cold-blooded killer again now that there was no need to appease the wretched motion picture production code, and they sort of did, but they also tried to weasel out of it a bit. The scene is a little hard to follow because it's not instantly clear if Maxim is just recreating what happened with Rebecca, trying to get his new wife to shoot him in the same way, or both, but it seems that Rebecca handed him the gun and goaded him into pulling the trigger. Don't get me wrong, in the book it was very likely that she was trying to get Maxim to kill her to avoid her impending slow death and ruin him as a bonus, but having her literally load the gun and cock it for him does reduce Maxim's guilt as much as possible without ditching the plot point altogether. What I consider to be the biggest deviation from the original plot is the way that the investigation into Maxim de Winter goes down. First of all, Maxim concedes to Favell's blackmail attempt instead of calling his bluff in an incredible display of stubborn pride. Then, unlike in the book where he's treated like royalty throughout the whole affair because he's mad rich and personal friends with the head of the local police force, making it clear the only thing that could get him in trouble is indisputable damning evidence, this film explicitly says in the dialogue that no one is above the law and he gets locked up for a bit. Instead of just being helplessly swept along with things in the end of the story, the lead now goes completely rogue and breaks into the doctor's office with the intention of destroying evidence, but gets caught in the act. However, the final plot twist that Rebecca had a terminal illness remains the same, so her new, more empowered actions don't ultimately have any effect on the story. Is almost doing something more feminist. The film ends on a positive note, making it clear that the lead and Maxim are still happily bonking all over the world post-Manderley's destruction, unlike the book, which opens with the forewarning that not many years later Maxim's mental health unexpectedly degrades and the lead ends up as his full-time carer. FYI, when the lead was chasing after Mrs. Danvers at the end, I was like, holy shit, is this version gonna end with an epic clifftop battle? I mean, it'll be hella off-book, but I kinda wanna see it now. I was pleased to see that at least the iconic dress incident and the following attempt from Mrs. Danvers to talk the lead into jumping out of the window, interrupted by a boat crash, was pretty much book accurate, though I couldn't help but compare it to how much more effective it was in the 1940 version. Rebecca never directly appearing in the story, even in flashbacks or photographs, is somewhat integral, I think, and I'm trying to decide if the brief shot of her submerged skeletal corpse counts. Weird decision either way. In conclusion, I think the main reason this adaptation fails hard is... well, Rebecca the book is a story about very, very flawed people, so much so you would be forgiven for being unsure who were the real villains at the end, and the makers of this film just didn't seem willing to commit to these flawed characters. The lead is less of a pushover, Maxim is less of an arsehole, even the titular Rebecca is less of an overwhelming presence. It's almost like the guys who made it are under the impression that this is a romance story instead of a gothic horror thriller. The end result is just dull and lifeless. It lacks almost all of the gravitas of the book and the intensity of the Hitchcock movie. Not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's already slipping from my memory. Give it a few more days and it'll be like it never existed, which is, almost worse than being remembered for being terrible. I'm curious to know if anyone else had a different reaction to it, especially if you haven't read the book, because I'm aware that my inescapable fixation on the adaptation side of things can sometimes overwhelm my overall opinion. If you like this film just as a film, sound off in the comments, I really would like to know. And now, a word about our sponsor. Surfshark is a reliable and affordable VPN, which, in case you didn't know, is an essential tool for protecting your privacy and personal information online. They filter all of your incoming and outgoing information through secure servers located around the world, so dodgy marketing companies and worse cannot keep track of your activities. If you go to surfshark.deal/Dominic Noble or follow the link in the video description, you'll get 83% off a 2-year plan and 3 extra months of Surfshark for free. A massive bonus of the worldwide servers is they can be utilized to make it appear that you're using the internet in another country. Ergo, you will never again be restricted by the seemingly arbitrary geo-blocking restrictions on streaming websites like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney+. Hello, I would like to watch Prison Break, please. No, I'm sorry, that's not available in your country. Oh, but I'm not in my country. I'm in South Korea, yes. Oh, well, my mistake. Enjoy your show. That's what I think Netflix would sound like if it could talk. A single Surfshark account can be used across all of your devices, and as I said, if you go to surfshark.deal/Dominic Noble, you'll get 83% taken off the cost of a 2-year plan and an additional 3 months for free in the bargain. Thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to help top up my channel's defensive shield that protects against the ravages of the uncaring YouTube algorithm by hitting that like button, commenting, and sharing. If you're new here, do consider subscribing to be kept in the loop of future content. Please take care of yourselves out there, and I will see you soon.
Some might say that I'm a loner, but I just call it being free. I am my heart's only owner, or at least I used to be.
Much love and appreciation to my patrons of honor, Shelby Holtz, Sam Cucinotta, and Atel Spurdloff. Fire-prone weather has been found in your area. I love living in Southern California. You know, last time I said a surf shake, and now I'm saying sun shark. I'm really bad at this. A single sun shark, I didn't change it. Surf shark.